Guys, welcome to the Vlad Catcher Show, the #1 show for founders, execs, and entrepreneurs who are scaling their businesses. This video is presented by Lindy.ai, and we have an amazing interview for you today with its founder and CEO, Flo Crivello, about how he created and scaled this business. Flo, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Vlad.
Well, tell us, Flo, what's the origin story? How did this product come about?
Yeah. We almost stumbled upon AI agents. My previous startup, we were building a video conferencing solution. And at some point, we built a meeting recorder. And at some point, when the GPT API, GPT-3 API came out, it was before ChatGPT, we incorporated it into our meeting recording solution to make it summarize meetings. And little by little, we added to the meeting recorder. So at first, we made it update our Salesforce in Salesforce, and then we made it draft follow-up emails for the sales team. And so we kept adding and adding and adding to it, and then at some point, it just clicked for the team, and we realized, like, oh my God, like, this can be a full-blown AI employee. Like, LLMs are not just good for generating copy, they're also good for taking action, which was a new insight. Like at the time, no one was talking about agents. Now everyone is talking about agents. But at the time, no one was. It was like mid-2022 or so. And then ChatGPT came out and like exploded. And so that's when we really decided to like pivot the entire company to this, which is like this no-code platform to build AI agents.
And what's the core use case of Lindy.ai, Flo?
Yeah. The main use cases are going to be in go-to-market, operations, and support. So in go-to-market, you're going to have like AI SDR workflows. So like lead generation, lead enrichment, lead qualification, lead outreach. You're going to have like AE workflows. Like you can have an AI prepare you for your meetings, sit with you during the meetings to take notes and coach you like as a salesperson. After the meeting, again, like update your CRM or draft any follow-up email. In support, it's just like customer support operations. Like we've got customers save like millions of dollars, like basically automating almost the entirety of their customer support. And then in operations, it's a lot of like invoice processing, document processing, like revenue operations and so forth.
So the kind of the three main departments, right, that use Lindy.ai, it's sales, it's customer support, and recruiting. And can we give the viewers like a few more specific examples for each of those departments? Like for sales, you mentioned that it helps them prepare for meetings and then takes meeting notes, right? That's kind of the sales one. Can you also briefly touch us on the customer support and the recruiting example again? So that I want the viewers to fully understand, how this product would help them.
Yeah, for sure. So customer support, you can really think of it think of it as for now like a junior customer support agent that can handle the simpler 70% of your tickets. So like for like the really most complicated 30% or like the highest value customers, you still might want a human in the loop, but you can still cut like your customer support volume by 70%, which is major. And it's super omni-channel. So like whichever channel your customer support happens in, that's a channel we can handle. Like phone calls, like email, SMS, Telegram, WhatsApp, Freshdesk, Zendesk, Intercom, like you name it, we support it. So basically like automating the bulk of your customer support is what the customer support use case is about. Operations is a little bit of a catch-all, but I'm just out of a call with, it's actually a hospital in the US, and they have a lot of documentation to process for like insurance claims handling. And so they receive, it's crazy actually, they still work on faxes. So they're bypassing the SaaS, if you will. They're going straight from like faxes to agents. They're like, we have like multiple people. We have an entire team of people, which entire job, it breaks my heart to think that humans are doing this job. Like the entire job of these people is the worst job in the world. They're receiving the faxes and they're looking at the fax and they're processing it and then they're like entering it in some system internally and they're like dispatching it to someone internally. All of that we can fully automate with agents, and I think in like a week or two, we're going to have this 100% automated with agents.
And Flo, this product seems quite complicated. Like Lindy doesn't actually sound like, a simple product to build. So how did you guys build this tech, and what advice would you share with other entrepreneurs who are also building kind of complicated products like this?
Yeah, I wish there was an answer to this one beyond just like blood, sweat, and tears. It's all there is to it. It's like you just keep banging your head against the wall. You try 1,000 things. I think having a tight iteration loop is key. You're gonna fail. You're gonna screw up. So your first attempt to build it is gonna be wrong, and you're gonna do the second one, and the second attempt is going to be wrong as well. And the third one, and the fourth one, and the fifth one, and you just keep doing it, and you rinse and repeat, and little by little, you're gonna figure out the things or two, and it's going to end up working. I wish there was a shortcut. At least I haven't been able to find one.
Flo, many businesses think that things get easier once they find product market fit, but usually that's not the case. Usually once you find product market fit, it's still very, very challenging to scale the business, right? So what would you say are kind of some of your biggest lessons in scaling Lindy?
Yeah, I certainly thought things would get easier after product market fit. I think it's just the nature of the problems you're working on changes. But more money, more problems. It just always gets more complicated. I often think of this quote of, before product market fit, it's like you're pushing a boulder uphill. And after product market fit, it's like you're chasing the boulder downhill. And the first time I heard this quote, I misunderstood it. I thought the person meant like, it's awesome, you're chasing the boulder downhill. And no, actually he means like it's just a different kind of problem. It's a problem to chase a boulder downhill. It's just a different kind of problem. So what I have learned is like, post product market fit, it really becomes about system design. You are thinking of your company as a great system, and I think it becomes less about it becomes a little bit less of an art and a little bit more of a science. And I think it is when like you must put your big boys pants and you must start to think about processes and repeatability and reports and metrics and KPIs and goal settings and organizational design and all of those perhaps boring things from the outset become excruciatingly important. And if you don't get them right, you feel it.
System design. By that, you mean processes. You're saying the key thing to scaling a business post product market fit is designing these processes. Which one would you say was kind of challenging for you guys, Flo? Like which process or department was kind of challenging to set up this way?
Yeah, I'd pick two. I think one that I underestimated is really the company-wide, the operating model of the company. And so in our case, that's entailed having a goal-setting system and a reporting cadence where we have like a weekly business review where like all the cross-functional leaders are meeting at the same time and reviewing it. It's a really long document that we bring together, and like we have one person whose full-time job it is to manage this entire company-wide process. So we have this 50 pages doc, and we have this 2-hour long. It's a very expensive meeting, but I think it's the most important meeting in the company. 2-hour long meeting every week where all the functional leaders are meeting, reviewing this 50 pages long document, and they're on the same page about all the metrics in the company, all the things that are happening, the priority and the biggest problems in the company. I think that's one that's been really important for us to figure out. And once we figured it out, the entire company felt very different, and it felt like information was flowing so much more smoothly. I think the second one that we've iterated a lot on, and frankly we're still figuring out, is our recruiting processes. I'm a very big believer in the idea that the people you hire are the company you build. I think like it is perhaps surprising how much time you should spend on recruiting, including on your recruiting processes and making sure that your recruiting function is world class, like second to none. And so we've constantly iterated on like, how do we interview candidates? How do we decide which candidates to engage with? How do we debrief about candidates in a way that minimizes bias? How do we go back 6 months later, literally 3 or 6 months later after hiring someone and hold a retrospective? Like in both the cases that worked out and the cases that did not work out, we're meeting as a team. Everyone who interviewed the person, hey, we hired Bob 6 months ago. Bob's awesome, right? Or conversely, Bob is not awesome and we fired Bob since then. What did we learn? How can we close the loop and improve our recruiting processes so that next time we hire Bob again or we don't hire Bob again?
You're kind of stressing the importance of hiring and the processes within the hiring, department. What else would you say are some of your really kind of important hiring lessons, Flo?
You hire for attitude over aptitude. And over the years, after having held a lot of those hiring retrospectives like that, I have learned that there is simply no substitute for intensity. Um, it's very salient right now for me because last week we unfortunately had to make the decision of letting go of someone, and it was simultaneously extraordinarily painful for me to let go of them, because if I had to rate the person, they were like a 7 out of 10, which is not awful. And I think the 7s are like the most painful to let go of. Like when someone is like a 3 or 4, it's never pleasant to let go of someone, but you just do it. When someone is a 7 and you're like, they can get the job done. And so that's why I'm saying it was simultaneously painful, but at the same time, I was like, it's one of those moments where like I feel like I have grown as a founder. Well, the person had only been here for a couple of weeks, and I was like, look, he can do the job, but he doesn't have the intensity that I'm looking for. And I know from experience, I have never seen someone start with a lack of intensity and gains the intensity. What you see is what you get. And I just decided if you want to build a culture of intensity, which I think you should as a startup, then you have to hold that bar even when the person otherwise is doing the job.
How do we look for that flow? Because intensity, I agree, it's so important. If you get intense folks in your business, right, it helps you scale so much. But what can we do to look for that, kind of to identify who's kind of an intense individual?
I have the answer to this, but really mostly the headline is like, you know it when you see it. You can feel it. I think like it's going to sound woo-woo, but I'll never forget this advice that an investor actually gave to me. And the first time I heard it, I thought it was woo-woo, and now I'm like, oh my God, he was so right. It's like, check your energy levels after and before talking with someone. Do you feel more energized after talking to them than before? And I think that tells you a lot. And so you can feel it when you're talking to someone and they have that fire in their belly. And I think like more tactically, what you do is, one, you see how they've spent their formative years. You see what they've done in college. Like, were they just like around, like in their 20s, just like partying with their friends, or like did they actually build something? Did they have side projects, right? Like, what was their goal? You ask them about like profoundly, who are you as a person? It's by the way, I literally asked this question. I'm like, tell me about you. And like, what do you mean about me? Like, tell me about you. How do you roll? What's your style? What are your values? Like, how are you different from other people? And then you can immediately tell the difference between someone who's just like, oh, I pride myself on my level of conscientiousness, and the person who's like, I want to go after it. I want to be the best at what I can at whatever I'm doing in the world. Like you can feel that fire. Then again, very tactically, and this one is a trick from Alexander Wang, the founder of Scale. He said, ask people for when is the hardest that you have ever worked in your career. And then you ask very specifically, like exactly how hard did you work? Like how many hours a week? And if someone tells you 50 hours a week, that's like a massive red flag. Like that like 50 hours is like an easy week, And then you ask them like, why did you work so hard? Was it just because the boss was on your back, or like did you actually feel the inner pressure to work hard and push yourself?
Flo, what mistakes, have you personally made as a leader, right? Could be in hiring, could be in scaling, prioritization, that you would suggest to others to avoid?
I think two of them. The first one I would say is premature scaling, and that's a mistake I see a lot of founders commit. There's a paper called the Startup Genome Project that takes a systematic approach at analyzing the most common sources of startup failure. And it identified the top one as premature scaling. And basically, the reason why people commit this mistake is because like scaling feels like winning. Hiring people feels like winning, but it's actually losing. And the reason why it's so pernicious is because it feels like winning. Founders are eager to do it. And I always distinguish pre and post product market fit startups as like two very, very different, like qualitatively different beasts. One of them is about, I use the analogy of like a gold-seeking expedition. A pre-product market fit is like looking for a place where there is gold, and the post-product market fit expedition is like digging for gold and building a mining operation. And they're very, very different skill sets. And there is no point building a mine until you found a place where there is a lot of gold. You can mine as hard as you want. If there's no gold, it doesn't matter. And the thing is that once you've built a mine, two things happen. One, it's really hard to move it. It's really, really hard to get all of this equipment and all of these people and to move it to a new site. And two, you as a founder are now busy operating the mine. It's a full-time job to run a mine. And the problem is that looking for gold, prospecting for sites, is a founder's job and a founder's job only. No one but you can do it. So I think premature scaling is the first mistake. The second one I would say is over-delegation. I think delegating is a necessary evil. You must do some of it, obviously, because you can't do it all yourself as a founder. But I think that there is an important difference between delegation and abdication. And I think that as a founder, you should always feel free and empowered to go as deep as you don't want. And ideally, it should be very deep on a daily basis. You should pick things in the business to go extremely deep on. And totally unapologetically lays the law. You can totally just go deep here and be like, this is wrong and we're going to do it this way. And not let yourself be overruled by the head of product, the head of customer experience, the head of whatever. The buck stops at you and you must be willing to lead your team in these functions. I think that second failure mode is a lot of where founder mode is now a fashionable term in startups. I think that's where it comes from. It's like that realization from founders. It's like, wait a minute, this is my startup, the buck stops at me. I know a lot about this business. I have a lot of context. And it turns out I trust myself and I trust my decisions. And I must be able to make these decisions and to overrule the team oftentimes on these decisions.
And I'd like to ask you a product question, Flo. What's the key to building great tech products, especially in our age of AI where things are moving so quickly?
I really like Patrick Collison. He tweeted that a couple of years ago, where he said, building great products comes from a conjunction of deep expertise in the domain and deep expertise in your user. I often I use the analogy of the hammer. That's Brett Victor. He's like a genius designer. Came up with this analogy. Is like a hammer is a tool to push nails down. Okay, and if you look at the hammer, there's two parts to the hammer. There's the head of the hammer and there's the handle. One part pertains to the job to be done, which is pushing down nails, and the other pertains to the user, which is it has a hand. And so if you want to build a really good hammer, you must understand the human hand, which will let you build a really ergonomic handle, like the fancy hammers now that have like fingers, like grooves and so forth. And you must understand the nails. Like how do you push a nail down? It's not really hard. You must have something heavy, basically. If you understand these two things, you can build a good hammer. I think it's the same thing with any tool that you're trying to build. You must understand the problem you're trying to solve really deeply, and you must understand your user very deeply. And then I would add one ingredient, which I mentioned earlier, which is a ton and a ton of iteration. I think it is surprising how iteration can be an adequate substitute for a brain. I think in the limit, like the most extreme example of that is like natural selection and evolution, right? It's like a brainless process that's given rise to like extraordinarily complex biological organisms, and just through iteration, right? So like that gives you a clue. Like iteration can build incredible things. So that's not to say that you should turn off your brain, but you also should not overestimate the abilities of your brain and your own ability to come up with an amazing solution in isolation from the top of your ivory tower. You can't build an amazing design in isolation. You should think about it, become an expert in your problem, become an expert in your user, build something, and as soon as possible, put it in the hands of users so that you can understand in what ways your solution is wrong and you can work from there.
Flo, I imagine you do many jobs. Like I imagine you as the CEO of Lindy, you do many different things. What would you say is the core job of a tech startup CEO?
I'm going to reuse the YC line here. It's to build something people want. At the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. Now, there's a lot of instrumental jobs that you have to perform in order to do that. And the canonical answer here, and again, I used to underestimate how true it was, but I think the more you scale as a startup, the more it is the case that your only job as a founder is, there's really three of them. It's make sure you don't run out of cash, raise money, define the mission, and hire the team. If you've done these three things, you've done 90% of your job as a founder.
Raise the cash, define the vision, and hire the team is 90%, right?
That's 90%. If you've picked the right thing to work on, and you've hired the right people to work on the things, and you need the cash to hire the people, you're 90% of the way there.
If you were, starting Lindy today in 2025, and you go back to the beginning, what would you do differently, Flo?
The advice I just gave of shipping as soon as possible and putting your product in the hands of users as soon as possible, I would heed that advice more. I would employ a more iterative approach.
Speed, right? Ship software even faster.
Yeah, I almost want to put it in provocative terms, because everyone agrees that you should ship fast, and I think the reason people don't do it is because they haven't embraced the trade-off. So I almost want to say you should ship. It's a whole like a Reid Hoffman thing. It's like if you're not embarrassed by your first version, you shipped too late. You should embrace. You should ship the least amount that you need to ship to prove out your thesis. Like the simplest possible solution to the problem you're trying to solve is what you should ship.
And it's also a prioritization thing, right? So they have to ship it fast, but they also have to think very, very critically about what is the core thing that we need, right? Because otherwise they can ship many nice to have things or, good things, but not the core thing that you must have. So they should ship it fast, but also they have to be very careful in choosing what to ship, right?
100%. Yeah, there is no limit to the amount of useless things that you could ship and work on. So it's your job as a product person to really be really crisp about like what is the soul, what is the core of the problem you're trying to solve and of the solution you're shipping, and ship that soul.
And I have one more question about hiring, Flo. How did you build out the team when you started Lindy? Like it went from you to how did you scale the team, and how would you tweak that team building process if you were going to redo that today, knowing everything you know?
Wow. Yeah, that is really one of the things what we've learned so much about hiring. How did I build a team? Initially it always starts from your network. Like you hire your friends and you hire people you've worked with, and if you don't have that, it's harder. It's not impossible. Plenty of people have done it, but it's harder. And then what you do is like blood, sweat, and tears. You reach out to, it's a funnel. You reach out to 10,000 people, and you're going to talk to 100 of them, and then you're going to interview 50 of them, and then 5 of them are going to make it, maximum. So, and then what I would do differently, I, again, like pay a lot more attention now to like attitude over aptitude. I am now a lot more comfortable taking a gamble on someone's aptitude, on someone's skills, because it's people can acquire skills, and smart people can acquire skills very, very quickly. People don't really change their attitude. It just takes years at best, and they have to go through something transformative personally for them to change their attitude. So I pay a lot of attention to that. I pay a lot more attention to the small things now when I interview people, and I make it a point. I try to I work really hard now to make my interviews sound like as un-interview-like as possible. I find people reveal a lot more about themselves if they're not too nervous, by the way, about chatting with you. And so it should feel like a casual conversation, and should feel like you're really trying, which you are. You're really trying to understand them as a human. You're really trying to understand what they're about as a person, And again, paying attention to the very small things. Paying attention to the exact words they use, paying attention to their body language, paying attention to, I think people reveal a lot about themselves in like the sparkle in their eye at certain moments in when they're speaking. You can tell when the emotional load that comes with each story they're talking about. Like if they're talking about a time when they're like grinding with the team and just working super hard and like nothing was going well, like what's the emotion there? Is it an emotion of like doggedness and determination? It's like we saw it through, like we weren't going to lose ever, right? I've met people like that. And it's like it's something to behold, to like see that level of determination. Or is it like, oh yeah, and I guess we did that, and I guess we did that? Like the tone matters almost more than the words in a way. Yeah.
And Flo, what advice would you share with entrepreneurs aside for ship fast, right? Because ship fast was so important kind of to one of your learnings, but what other advice would you share with the entrepreneurs building tech companies?
I love Winston Churchill's, if you're going through hell, keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's the best business advice you personally received?
No one's going to help you, but no one's going to stop you either. And it's not totally true that no one's going to help you. Like, actually, people are going to help you, but I find it weirdly empowering to assume no one is going to help you.
Well, Flo, I'm really grateful that you came on the show and shared the Lindy journey and shared many of your valuable lessons. Is there anything else you would like to say to our viewers before we log off?
We are hiring. Hit me up at Flo@Lindy.ai. We're hiring across all functions. Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
All right, Flo. Thank you, man. See you.